Hi. All right. So my case study is broken up into two parts for this plan change process. And I broke it up into micro and mezzo. I'm going to start with micro. So this is coming from Tammy's story. She was a client and group participant in 1 and 6, which was this group that I facilitated, and one of the goals was to talk about what we want to see change in the community. And she attended, and she told me as well about some issues that she was facing, and we talked about that for about an hour. And so, background information on her: she is a single mother raising her teenage daughter. She's a widow also who lives off military survivor benefits, and she's been looking for a job unsuccessfully for the last 6 months. She's utilized LC Staffing and Missoula Job Services, but has not been able to secure a job. And she stated too that she thinks a lot of it is her age. She's about 45 years old, and she's not getting hired for the same kind of service jobs that she was hired for when she was younger, and she's capable of doing, has a good work history of doing that. And she also stated that gender can be a issue as well in what kind of jobs are made available to her, and they're oftentimes lower paying jobs. And the second presenting issue that she talked about was homelessness and insecure housing, lack of affordability in housing, really. So her and her daughter were homeless last year, and they were living out of their car for the summer. And she now has a bedroom that she's renting from some friends that her daughter is also in there with her, and it's overcrowded, and her friend now needs that room back, so they're facing homelessness again. And she reports that she spent about $250 in application fees alone in the past month and hasn't been able to get housing. Another barrier is that she has a record of eviction. So it's just a one-time instance, but it happened from low-income housing that she was staying at. They raised the rent, and she wasn't able to afford it anymore. So that having that on her record has created a barrier in securing housing. She also is utilizing Section 8, but her vouchers expire before she's able to secure a house, and she's stuck in the cycle still of facing homelessness. So she's contemplating about bringing this issue up to her church, one of the resources she hasn't utilized yet, and it's a point of personal pride for her. She is kind of hesitant to, but she's thinking about it. And I will get to the mezzo part of my case study more in the intervention and evaluation section of the plan change process, because that makes up that section. And this discussion that I had with Tammy during this meeting makes up the engagement and assessment portion of my plan change process. So, getting back to it, I incorporated the ecosystems perspective because it focuses on housing policies and the barriers that Tammy's experiencing with that, as well as hiring practices and potentially just the norms that dictate those, or sometimes discriminatory hiring practices. And that I also incorporated the diversity perspective, highlighting her gender and age and how that affects her and her being unemployed. And I also incorporated the strengths perspective because talking with her too, you could really get the sense that she was really motivated to just take care of her daughter and herself, and she already knows all about so many of these resources available to her, and I just reiterated that back to her, that is definitely a strength. And moving on to the assessment, I incorporated the crisis theory. Tammy and her daughter experience periodic states of crisis surrounding housing and employment and food security. She was at the food bank primarily because she needed food, and she decided to do the meeting instead of waiting. And in the waiting room, sorry. And also I included the cycle of change theory because she's kind of in the action phase with utilizing all these different resources and trying to get employment and secure housing, but she's also kind of in the contemplation phase of bringing this issue up to people at the church because she has some hesitancy to do so, and It's just a point of personal pride again for that. And I incorporated the family systems theory as well because she mentioned some strain between her and her daughter, and it really coming from just toxic stress from the crises that they do experience. And I included the social exchange theory as well because of her eviction. Rental agencies and landlords, they're self-interested, right? So they're largely self-interested, so they're trying to mitigate the risk of taking on a potential renter, and having that record indicates a risk to them, and that kind of exchange is causing difficulties for her. And the standpoint theory as well, Tammy really had a good sense of social policies and how that creates personal adversities in her life. So she has a lot of strengths. She's knowledgeable of resources, and she has a really strong love for her daughter, and she's persevering despite all of this, and she has a strong motivation to keep trying. And some of the problems are unfair housing policies, inaffordability of housing, unemployment, and a hesitancy to ask for help. So, moving on to my intervention section, this is comprised of the 1 in 6 program that my supervisor helped in the planning somewhat, and I facilitated individually. So, about that, it was a client-centered model, so group members decide what they're going to talk about, what they want to see changed in the community. They shape the discussion. And in the empowerment model, we were trying to empower individuals as change makers too. And the mutual aid model, so people could come together and share what resources they know about, and maybe it's informal, maybe it's formal, but they can come together through open discussion and talk about those. And okay, so the first goal of the treatment plan was to just launch the program and try to incorporate it into MFB's host of services. So my first objective was to recruit clients for engagement in the group through flyering and asking clients directly if they wanted to attend and be a part of it. The second objective was to facilitate the group once a week for 4 weeks, kind of time limited to see how it went. And objective C, so I created an agenda for introductions and expressing group purpose to the participants. And the objective D of launching the program was to gather feedback from the participants, to actually have the meetings and see what they thought too. So goal 2 of the treatment plan was to alleviate isolation and the waiting period to the shop. Sometimes people in poverty are experiencing isolation, and by creating a space where they can come together and connect, it might be helpful in alleviating that. And alleviating the waiting period to shop, coming into the food bank, it can be an undignified experience sometimes. The wait period can be long, it can be hectic in there, and I tried to open up the conference room, rearrange a little bit, and provide a light breakfast to just make it more welcoming and a calm space for people if they would want an alternative to the waiting room. And objective B, so it also, or objective C I should say, also gives opportunity for clients to give feedback about MFB services, or just to vent about maybe that undignified experience, right? Help alleviate that waiting period to shop. And also objective 3, maybe it should be objective 1, is to get people talking about what they wanted to see change in the community. That's the goal. Sorry, the goal is to get people talking about what they want to see change in the community and possibly inspire them as change makers. And the objective was to come together and actively listen to people in order to do that. So, moving on to the evaluation. The termination process for the group program was unfortunately determined by low turnout. So the first 2 were pretty successful. I had a lot of good group engagement, and the second 2 just not so much. There's some reasons for that. But evaluation tools, so achievement of goals, the level of goal attainment, we achieved helping an alternative for the waiting room sometimes. We did get people talking about what they wanted to see change in the community, but I don't think it was the most sustainable model that it could have been. And program evaluation, so there's some barriers to participation in the group too. You come to the food bank primarily to get food, and sometimes coming back or coming at an inconvenient time to meet for a group can be stigmatizing, or you just maybe just don't want to have to go there again. Self-assessment. So me as the group facilitator, I wanted to incorporate alternate recruiting practices, maybe get some more regulars at the store to have more consistent attendance if we were to take on a project like this again in the future, and program implementation, possibly having it as an umbrella under the Volunteer Advocates Program. All right, I'm out of time. Thank you.